All right, good morning, leaders, builders, and change makers. Good morning. It's a full house, guys. Good morning. Fantastic. A round of applause for each one of you present here. For thank you for making it to RAISE 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, RAISE 2025, hosted by L&T Finance, India's leading AI platform for banking, financial services, and insurance sector. This year, we explore the theme of accelerating financial services with AI. My name is Sohul Kapadia, and I'm going to be a host for this wonderful event. It feels great to be in the room with so many people who are driving this future forward. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what sets RAISE apart is the mindset in this room, the intent to use AI with purpose. Not just to experiment, but to execute. Not just to scale, but to scale responsibly. The balance of ambition and the accountability is what defines this platform. Ladies and gentlemen, this room brings together people who are here to build, question, and push what's possible with AI. However you choose to engage with us today, you're contributing to what comes next. So without further ado, let's start with the first session, which focuses on data products fueled by generative AI, moving past the hype and into the real implementation. Our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Stephen Probst, CTO at Ab Initio Software, is one of the world's leading authorities on large-scale data systems. He has advised global enterprises and national governments on how to build data platforms that actually deliver business outcome. He has a dozen of patents and hundreds of publications in the areas of data management and machine learning. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome Dr. Stephen Probst.
Thank you for that introduction. Good to be here in Mumbai. So we're going to talk a little bit differently today because there's a lot of discussion around AI needing data. Of course, we all understand that. The discussion today is why data needs AI. Turn the tables around. So we're going to talk about building data products using generative AI and AI agents to accelerate that process. Before we get into that, I want to address the most common question that I've had since I arrived in India last Sunday. Is this my first time to India? Everybody asks me that question. I'm happy to say that actually this is the 30th anniversary of my first visit to India, back when Bangalore was a very small place. And I've been coming multiple times every year except during COVID, building tech organizations in Hyderabad and Pune and other places. So this is not my first time in India. These are some of my early visits. That's the Lion Fort in Pune, the Red Fort in Delhi, Ellora Ajanta. This is my Bangalore family, the son of my good friend in Bangalore. And so I've been coming to India for a long time. That's my first wedding in India. And of course, the Taj Mahal, Rajasthan near Jaisalmer. Many people don't know that the largest dome in the world, unsupported dome. Where's the largest unsupported dome? It's the Vatican. Where is the second largest dome in the world? It's Bijapur, right? And that's what you see over here. The Gartner IT Expo this year is going to be in Kochi. If you go there, you can see the grave of Vasco da Gama down there on the bottom left. And this is some hiking I do with a good friend of mine in the northeast near Darjeeling. And there's some tea plantations. So I tell my Indian friends, I've been more to India than you have. Because they always have to go back home every time to see their family in the same cities over and over again. I come every year and go new places in India. And so it's an amazing country. This is my annual haircut in Calcutta. And I spend a lot of time here. There's the border that's now closed between Pakistan and India. And here is where I spend Christmas every year, which is in Amritsar at the Golden Temple. I know most people, tourists, go to the Taj Mahal. I go to the Golden Temple. So not my first time in India. Love this place. So let's now get into the real content, the real meat of the discussion. All companies in the 21st century claiming, we are an AI company. Let me tell you, you are not an AI company unless you're first a data company. There is no AI without data. And so we need to build that data foundation in order to fuel the AI. And the industry, we got to do a big problem, and I'm going to blame the economists for some of this. They coined this term, data as an asset. Terrible term. In fact, they went even one step further and said, data is the oil of the 21st century. Oil is a dirty resource, right? You use it, you pollute, use once. Data, the more you use it, the cleaner it gets, the better it gets, right? So you don't want to be data as an asset thinking, you want to be data as a product thinking. But data as a product is not just putting bytes on disk drives. We did that 10, 15 years ago. People shoveling data onto Hadoop distributed file system, IT people declaring wild success, having big parties, another petabyte onto an object store somewhere. And the business is like, we just spent gazillions of dollars and we got no value. This is terrible. That's data as an asset thinking. What do you do with an asset? You shovel bytes onto a disk drive, you put it in a warehouse, you put castle guards in front of it, they're called DBAs, and the answer is no. Data as a product thinking is, we're going to consume that data to generate intelligence. And if you're going to consume data and generate intelligence, you have to package that data for consumption. I have to be able to find that data. It has to be discoverable. There have to be business metadata that describes what data do I have in business terms. A business person does not want technology discussions. They want business discussions. I should be able to search with natural language to find out where is the best place to get the data for understanding clients and this geography and this line of business, et cetera, et cetera. Discoverability. That's really through the business metadata. But if you build a business metadata infrastructure that is an island and doesn't connect to the technical metadata that tells you how to get the data to make it addressable, because in the end, we have to go get the data. And the business person doesn't care if your data is on-prem or in the cloud. They don't care if it's in Redshift or Teradata or BigQuery. They don't care. Don't care. Just give me access to the data. But of course, we in the room, most of you, since you're in the tech track, I assume that you've got your hands a little bit dirty, right? We need to go get the data. We need to get it from file systems and databases and so on. For that data to be useful, it has to be trustful. What is the key to trust? Transparency. Where did the data come from? What is the lineage of the data? What are all the transformations that we did to the data between the source system and landing it into my AI scoring algorithm? What are the data quality metrics? This is, again, all about metadata. If we look at the semantics of accessing the data, I've seen some people say, we are going to create a single version of the truth for the enterprise. Before you finish that sentence, you have already failed. For a complex enterprise, there is no single version of truth. I guarantee you your CFO counts revenue differently than your head of sales. I guarantee you the mortgage people, I mean, think about this. How many customers do you have? How simple a question can I ask? I will get 5 answers if I ask 4 people. Mortgage people count households, credit card people count individuals, all kinds of rules about who is a customer and who's not a customer and so on. It's not because finance is right and marketing is wrong, but of course finance is always right. But they have different use cases. So there are different versions of truth depending on what is my knowledge worker community, what is the context in which I want to get this question answered. That does not mean we should have one copy of the data for each one of these knowledge worker communities. We want one single source of truth, which we can use to reconcile the multiple versions of truth. Mortgage and credit card count customers differently because they have different rules for doing so, but it all reconciles when you look at single source of truth. Now, that single source of truth is not going to be in a big monolithic data warehouse. That never works for a complex organization. You got to have multiple data products, decentralized in terms of their deployment teams throughout the enterprise, and they need to be interoperable and so on, and that means that we need to have some global standards. In India, the DPDP regulations are starting to look very hard and squeeze on the protection of the data, protection of the privacy of the individual, and so we need to understand what data is PII, personally identifiable information, what data is PSI, and how to apply masking rules depending on who's accessing the data and so on, right? This is all metadata. Everything I described is metadata. And I know metadata is not sexy. You know, the business says, wait a minute. I don't even understand this concept of metadata, right? And the IT person, well, metadata is data about data. Oh, that makes my head hurt. I just paid for all the data, and now you want me to pay for data about the data? And it's interesting, because of the importance of metadata to provide context for your AI decision-making, metadata is now escalating in importance. So if you look at last year's Data and Analytics Conference in London for Gartner, one of the key taglines is, if you want to be AI-driven, you need to be metadata-driven. Right? Metadata is not passive documentation after the fact. Right? And this year, they sort of doubled down on this theme. So it's got to be active metadata, not passive. So let's talk about how we're going to use generative AI to revolutionize the creation and consumption of data products using agentic AI. So if you look at a traditional data pipeline, it probably looks something like this in most of your organizations. We've got a bunch of source systems, call centers, and core banking and finance and so on, and we're going to extract that data out, some form of change data capture, some form of pub sub on a message bus or streaming infrastructure. We're going to capture the data in raw form in a data lake. You might call it the bronze layer if you're using a medallion architecture. Right? In the data lake, that raw data doesn't really have a data model. It's not really organized anything more than what you got from the source system. It is not fit for consumption. That's what the big mistake was that people made, let's say 10 years ago, shoveling data into Hadoop. That was raw material. It was a good start, but it wasn't consumable by a knowledge worker. So in order to get from raw data into data product which is consumable, we need to have a manufacturing process. We need to curate and transform the data. We're doing data integration, we're doing surrogate key generation, metadata, master data management, et cetera, et cetera. And historically, that is a very manual process. This is humans spend about 80% of the time in building a data warehouse, a data product, in that manufacturing process. And it's ugly. And so this is ripe for opportunity using agentic AI. We can use, if you give the right fuel to the AI agents, and we'll talk about what that is specifically, then you can automate that process. And then we build the data warehouse. I don't mean a big monolithic data warehouse. I mean a collection of data products which are interoperable. Let's call that a logical data warehouse. These are your foundation data products. The knowledge worker is not going to be able to consume the foundation data products directly. They need these semantic layers that we discussed earlier. And so derived products is actually aligned to each one of those knowledge worker communities. And a finance person might want a cube that they can slice and dice and use dimensional analytics and drill down and so on. I will tell you, I don't know a single data scientist in the world that wants a cube to work with. They want a big, fat, wide record with 10,000 features in it, everything you can describe about a client. Now, these different structures depend on the knowledge worker community and what they're doing with the data. Now, if you talk to a DBA about building a wide record of 10,000 elements, they're going to say you're out of your mind. But that's what the data scientist wants. So this semantic layer that represents the derived data products does not have to be physical, it can be virtual. So use combination of physicalization and virtualization to optimize for cost, performance, extensibility, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So this is what we're doing in our data pipelines. And there'll be many of these data pipelines aligned to each one of the data products in your enterprise. So the promise here is using agentic AI to automate the mapping from the raw data that's in the data lake into the data in the data warehouse, the data products. Right? Now, you can't do that without strong context. So that raw data, we need the technical metadata describes how to access the data. We need to do semantic discovery that essentially builds the knowledge graph so that you understand all the relationships within the files and across files. And that should be all automated using the AI machine learning techniques that are now possible. Now, again, the techniques are actually not that new, but the economics of using the techniques is very different today than what it was 10 years ago. Most of the AI algorithms have existed for a long time. It's the economics that have changed and the ability to scale. So you can automate that mapping. And if you're in financial services, it's very important that you have data quality controls and data quality metrics that are defined on each of those elements. And those data quality controls can also be generated using agentic AI. And I'm going to generate those rules based on my internal banking policy, my regulators, and so on. In the past, again, it was a very manual process. Now I can do it in an automated way. Even the metadata, which is a form of documentation, and everybody hates documentation, we can create the business metadata using agentic AI, using generative AI techniques. And so there's huge opportunity to increase efficiency here. Now, what is the critical success factor for your agentic AI to deliver on this promise? It's the metadata context. The technical metadata that understands the profiles for the raw data. This is relatively simple to create using deterministic algorithmic approaches to go scan and get all that technical metadata. And then we can use more sophisticated AI techniques to build the knowledge graphs to understand that data. In your internal documentation as well as external regulatory documentation is used to sort of drive the mappings, drive the data quality controls. It's the context for your generative AI agents. And then you have a target data model which you're mapping to, again, metadata context. Now in the future, we believe that we'll be able to completely generate the target data model as well. Not quite there yet, but that's the direction in which we're moving, and there's a lot of patents in this area, and it's proceeding quickly. Now we have the data products. We want to consume the data products. Now, before you consume a data products, you want to have a conversation with the metadata to figure out where is the right place to get your fit-for-purpose data. Where is the most up-to-date data? Where is the highest quality data? Where is the data about this particular subject area or business process domain? Conversation with metadata in natural language. Language of your choice. Could be English, could be one of the many languages that exist on this continent. Once you understand what data you want and you've explored the marketplace, then you use natural language to interface directly with the data. The knowledge worker does not care about the database technology. The knowledge worker does not care about the cloud technology. Completely don't care. Insulate me from all of that using the AI agent to do the work behind the scenes, underneath the covers. Again, the critical success factor is the metadata context. The critical success factor is the business metadata describing the data product and then connecting that to the technical metadata that tells me where to get it and what access methods to use to optimize access to that data. And you've got the semantic mapping from your knowledge worker view of the data into the foundation data products and all the transparency so that I trust that data. So this is great stuff. This is revolutionizing the creation and consumption of data products. But you need to future-proof your solution. Underneath a lot of what I've talked about is large language model to sort of drive these conversations with data and metadata and the mapping from source to target and so on. So if you're going to future-proof, you do a very strong due diligence to figure out which language model should you use. No matter what you choose, even if it's the best language model at a point in time, in 6 to 12 months you will be wrong, because the technology is moving very, very quickly. So you need to build your metadata context independent of the particular language model. In fact, it is unlikely that a single language model is going to meet all of your requirements. The reality is you will have multiple language models coexisting. And in fact, they might not all be large language models. In some cases, a small language model is going to be more cost-effective for things where maybe you don't need the same level of accuracy or generality. Assume that your language model is going to change and that you're going to coexist multiple languages models. Assume that whatever cloud you're on today, you're going to pivot and you're going to have multiple clouds. I know most of the banks, they do a big due diligence, they make a big commitment, big announcement with some big hyperscaler. We're going with this cloud. Trust me, within 2 to 3 years, there'll be another announcement with a different cloud. And you won't get rid of the first one, you'll coexist them. So that interoperability is important, design for portability. So at Ab Initio, the approach we've taken, building the language model studio, is you can plug in the language model of your choice, and all of the metadata that you build, including the RAG vectors to drive the accuracy of models, it's all independent of a particular language model. Portability, interoperability, very important. So all the infrastructure that you use to drive retrieval augmented generation and sort of optimizing your prompt engineering and so on, these things need to be independent of the particular language model that you're using in order for long-term success. So let's use a very small example. You're a bank, you have a data quality control that all loans above $1 million, which are securitized, should have the collateral evaluated within the last 60 days. Pretty typical kind of thing. In the past, someone would write code to enforce that data quality control. Right? So first of all, it's a dangerous thing to say in this audience, but code is evil. Code is tech debt. And so I see a lot of people measuring their success with generative AI as how many lines of code did I generate in the last month? And management is ticking boxes. Oh, yes, it's good, it's good. And they don't understand that the more lines of code you have, the more tech debt you have. More code is bad. Right? The hard part is not code. The hard part is robust specifications that a business subject matter expert understands and that your regulator understands. So we could take this English language description, we could generate code. That would be a fail. We can do it. That's a fail. What I want is a robust specification in a formal language using your business terms extracted from your business metadata, and I'll use the AI agent to generate that. And then once I have that, I can compile this into highly optimized code. Now notice the difference in terminology. It's very purposeful. When I generate a specification, when you use a large language model, it is non-deterministic. By the way, if you use 3 programmers, it's also non-deterministic because they will do it in 3 different ways. Okay? It's not a bad thing, you just have to recognize it for what it is. Okay? So I generate this formal specification, and then my business expert, who if you generate straight to code, they have no way to understand what that code is doing. So maybe a programmer understands, but the programmer doesn't actually understand the business requirements. The auditor certainly doesn't understand. The regulator doesn't understand. That's a miss. So you generate the formal specification, you review it, yes, I agree or I don't agree, you tweak it, and then you compile. Compilation into code is highly deterministic. And I could change the underlying database. So in this example, some of the data is an Iceberg on OTF, on Azure, and then we got an Oracle database is on a different cloud and so on. And if I change the Oracle database to a Snowflake database, nothing here changed. All we do is compile to optimize for a different target. That's very important. So when you deploy, you might deploy initially on one cloud or on-prem and move it to another cloud, another database, and so on. The hard work that you did is completely preserved. This is very important from a future-proofing point of view. So the fastest path to data products is leveraging agentic AI, leveraging the language models, and I use that in plural because there will be multiple language models that you're probably going to use at least over time, both for creating the data products as well as for consuming the data products. Now, in order to make this work, we can talk about the sexy AI fabric. Yes, of course, you'll hear a lot about AI today. But that knowledge fabric is very important. So, in the past, we talked a lot about prompt engineering. Now the discussion is about context engineering. When you hear context engineering, think metadata. That's what's going on behind the scenes. And then you separate the logical definition of your formal specifications from the deployment, which is where the compute fabric takes, because of course you have to be able to implement everything and make it real, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very, very small example. I'm going to go through it very quickly. One of the keys to success is leveraging the ecosystem. No one solution is going to do all the work for you. Right? So Model Context Protocol allows you to interoperate across multiple AI agents. So any reasonable deployment of any agent is going to allow that agent to interoperate with other agents. And maybe they're a client, maybe they're a server. But for example, for this very large American bank, they are using, let's call it a co-pilot technology from a small startup company. The technology is called Devon. And their goal is to improve the productivity of their software engineers by leaps and bounds. Of course, everybody's making these promises and so on. The vendors will promise this, the reality's down here, but you've got to get on board and you've got to start moving. So Devon can be used to interoperate. Devon is the client, Ab initio is the server with the agentic AI to create new data quality controls, to make modifications, to change the implementation. We might have, for example, a precision on a timestamp, which is microseconds, and we need to move to nanoseconds because of high-frequency training, et cetera, et cetera. And that data type is flowed throughout the data flow of your pipelines. Now, a human chasing all that stuff down is terrible. But if you have the metadata context, we can automate that whole process. And when I say automate, that includes automating, for example, opening the JIRAs, saying what we're going to do, making the changes to the data structures, et cetera, and the algorithms, and then closing the JIRAs, all completely automated. Right? This is a big deal from a software productivity point of view. So when we talk about the interoperability, using MCP integration is very important, and you'll have Docker and Jira and SharePoint, whatever it is you use, any reasonable agentic implementation should be supporting this industry standard Model Context Protocol. So my call to action to you is first, embrace data as a product. Stop this data as an asset thinking. Bytes on disk drives does not create value. Creates cost, but not value. Consumable data to make your algorithms more intelligent. Embrace generative AI with metadata context to accelerate the construction of your data products and the consumption of your data products. And there's some very nice demos that you can go to in the room over there where you can see how Nostradamus, for example, is using some of these technologies. So I'd encourage you to go look at some of that. Embrace the ecosystem. Embrace Model Context Protocol. Embrace AI agents that are working together, not working in isolation. Embrace interoperability across multiple cloud providers, across multiple language models, both large and small language models. So with that, I thank you very much for spending this first part of the tech track with me. We've got a great lineup of speakers, and I'll turn it over to our moderator for this. I'll be around all day, so just come up with me for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Props, for that wonderful and an insightful session. I request you to please wait back. And to felicitate Dr. Props, I take this opportunity and invite on the stage our Chief Digital Officer, L&T Finance, Mr. Ramesh Aithal, to please come on the stage and present memento to Dr. Props. Let's have a round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, for the wonderful session at RAISE 2025. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next session explores a major shift underway, moving from the app economy to agent economy. Our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Sriyavash M. Alamuthi, a Marconi Fellow and co-founder of Mimic, has been a driving force behind some of the most foundational advances in modern communication and distributed computing. He is best known as the inventor of the Alamuthi code, adopted in almost all wireless standards and included in billions of devices worldwide. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome Sriyavash M. Alamuthi. Also, can we have a round of applause for Dr. Debarag Banerjee on the stage?
While Siavas is getting mic'd up, so here I go back to the time at Intel. Alamudi code, by the way, is the reason why your phone works faster than it used to during the 3G days. One of the first time somebody showed that things can go faster on two antennas, and it is so lovely to see him back in India. So,
all right.
Siavas.
Thank you, Dr.
Welcome,
Banerjee. Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Good morning. I was here last in India in 2009. Unlike Stephen, I haven't had the opportunity to come and visit every year. And at that time, between 2005 and 2009, I was here to evangelize a technology called mobile WiMAX, which was supposed to be the extension of Wi-Fi into cellular, starting from personal area networks to local area networks to wide area networks, and combining all of that to provide an open technology. So starting local, distributed on the network side. And now today, I'm here to evangelize something similar to you, because we were listening to the talk this morning. Mr. Subramanian was saying, oh, trillions of dollars a data center spend, right? Peter Norvig was talking about the massive amounts of compute that is required to do things, and the enterprises are failing with the LLMs. And I'm here to again highlight that you end up in these situations when you separate the network capacity from compute capacity, from the needs of the individuals and enterprises to provide the technology. You have to consider all of that. Today, when you look at the situation with the LLMs and the networks, we don't have that many agents. We just have the LLMs. We have maybe a few 100,000 autonomous vehicles that are spending 4 terabytes. And now we're being told that there's going to be hundreds of millions of autonomous vehicles. There's going to be 20 billion agents. The question is, where is the network capacity for this? And I did some calculations, rough calculations, about 10 years ago, and realized that the entire world network capacity of wired and wireless networks would only support millions of these robots and autonomous vehicles. So we would need 10,000 times, 100 times the capacity on the networks, let alone the GPUs and CPUs and all of that. Assume that we're going to have all of that compute. The networks wouldn't be able to support that. And then I also went for a couple of years as EVP of R&D to Wells Fargo. I started looking at banking applications because it was, you know, finance and financial well-being is one of the most important things. So it was my passion to use the technology to apply it to banking. So I'm summarizing today what I think we should do and what is the core technologies and architecture that is going to actually fulfill the promise. So when you look at in the last decade, we've been using mobile apps to make the lives of our people better. Whether it's on the health or finance, these applications have been fantastic. But it's a maze of applications. They're fragmented. And although they have helped our lives, but they have also created a lot of anxiety. We have one app for banking, we have one app for credit, we have another app for insurance. And it was interesting when I was at Wells Fargo, and before I joined, I thought the bank had a view of your 360 financial life. I didn't know each one of these was products, and the teams were not talking, and there was no 360 view of the customer. And it just astounded me. How can you actually manage and help people's financial lives where you're completely blind as to how they use these services? And that's why we have this friction between the financial institutions and their customers. So the problem that we need to solve is really to bring that 360 view for the customer and try to remove that anxiety. For customers, it means that you need a personal financial advisor. And the personal financial advisors currently is for the rich. Very few people have that. And as Steven suggested, for an advisor to be able to advise you properly, they need access to your financial life. There's a problem with privacy. I don't want my financial advisor necessarily to know everything that I do. Maybe I don't want him to know that I have pre-cancer conditions and I have to save $50,000. How do we bring this 360 view to the financial situation and then provide the right nudges, the right advice to our customers? For the enterprise, the meaning of this is that we have these siloed products, and now we're losing, maybe we are addressing 20% of the needs of the customers. We are throwing revenues down the drain. We have all the data, but as Steve very eloquently suggested, we don't know what to do with it. This data is fragmented, most of it is unusable, and we don't have a view to it. So AI agents are going to change this game, and they are the answer. And I'll try to explain how that model would work. Just imagine that you have an AI agent, not in the cloud, that is managed by somebody else, but in your smartphone. It has access to everything that you do, sees everything that you do, is fully trustable, is based on a zero-trust architecture. It looks at your spending, it looks at your needs, talks to you as to what your goals are. I want to save money for my kids' tuition by 2030. Gets all of that information. Oh, I need a cataract surgery in 6 months. It's going to cost a few $1,000s. It knows all of that, and then it can provide you with nudges. And then on the institution side, there are agents that can accelerate underwriting, getting the approvals, appraisals, and all of that. The key is that that agent needs to have persistent memory and needs to know every transaction that you're doing and all the important goals in your life, right? So, can we do this with the LLMs? No. Why not? Because LLMs, by nature, they have short memory, they hallucinate, right? Not that you can't give them long memory. Of course, you can give a big database to an LLM and keep a long memory, but it's going to cost hundreds, thousands of dollars per year in token costs for you to do that. So that's completely impractical. So what is the solution? Is agents that are specialized in various things. And it's not a single agent. It's not a single financial advisor. It's an agent that knows only about credit cards. There's an agent that knows about banking for savings, for education. There's an agent that only specializes in mortgage. You're going to have all of these agents. It's an agent that looks after your wellness. It has your biometric data from your Fitbit and all of that, and it's giving you nudges. Right? And then you have your own personal agent that trains and learns across all of these domains to make sure that your financial goals, your health goals, your education goals are all aligning with each other. So this requires that you're going to have a persistent memory and data across all of these things. And one of the biggest problems with this is data privacy, because when you say that, so well, I'm not going to share all of this information with Microsoft, Google, you know, OpenAI, this and that. These agents need to work for myself. So that's the architecture that we need to consider. And the other important thing is that this has to be a two-agent network. It can't be just a consumer agent and a banking agent that are not connected. In order to bring speed to financial transactions, you have agents that understand your needs. They need to be able to communicate that to the agents in the institutions and close the transactions fast. And I'll give you an example afterwards. And there has to be a firewall between consumer data and the institutions in order for it to be trust, because trust is fundamental to get this model working. So what is this? This is a technical track, so I'm not going to get, but I'm not going to get in too much detail, but I give you a very high-level view of what we've been doing in the last 10 years, since 2014, to address this problem. First of all, we had to ensure privacy of data. So the workflows of managing this data, we figured that needs to be on people's devices, on their smartphones, on the drone, on the robot, right? On the manufacturing arm, whatever, on your car. So you see that picture? There's a camera, it's a wearable. It has an operating system. So we created a layer on top of the operating system, which we call MIMOE, or the Mimic Operating Environment. And there you can run microservices with APIs, right? Because one of the biggest issues is that you have a 24/7 agent running on your phone. If it's a monolith, your battery is going to drain in an hour. It's constantly loading stuff into memory. So it has to be something that, through an API, calls a microservice. And then on top of that, you have all the tools that you typically get from cloud providers in terms of observability and all the platform as a service optimization tools that there are right on top of that environment. And then microservices and agents will run at a layer on top. And then the application is above that. We currently have models, for instance, for intelligent spaces, models for AI agent model providers so that they can build their agents on top with the tools and microservices that are below them. And all of this is independent of the OS, right? And also, of course, we're not going to do without the cloud. The cloud is absolutely needed because you need a global view. You need to sync up your data, perhaps store it in a place, in a safe, secure vault. You need a data vault locally on your device so it can be real-time accessed. It's not acceptable for the agent to be able to turn off. The agents need to mimic human behavior, just like us. If I'm not dependent on my mother anymore, I'm an adult. I don't have to depend as an agent on the cloud to do everything. I can depend on the cloud when I absolutely need it. When I need more compute, when I need to learn new things and get updated, the agent needs to go to the cloud and say, okay, what are the changes in rules on mortgage approvals so I can help my master to apply for a loan from L&T Finance. What is the latest requirements for that so I can fill out this form and apply? That's what the cloud should be used for, not for 24/7 operations. And the only way you're going to manage financial lives of people is with a 360 view and a 24/7 view to what they do. A lot is not described here because it's hard for me to give you the entire view of the architecture. But these agents, and one thing that you've got to look at, that these agents should be able to discover each other and talk to each other. So there has to be, for instance, an MCP server right there. The MCP server cannot be in the cloud. There has to be perhaps even a local LLM for natural language processing and all of that, so that you can talk to your agent. So we've integrated all of this, and now we've applied it into multiple sectors to try to provide that. And we call this device-first continuum AI, meaning everything starts where the data has the context. Stephen talked about the data coming to the data lakes. The data is the product, as he suggested. And the most valuable data sits right on the smart devices, on the smartphones, on the drones, on the robots, on the manufacturing arms. And there's no reason for you to have to send all of this data up to the cloud before you get any insight, right? Should be able to process as much as possible. And then there are issues. This around, you can't have, for instance, firewalls. Recently, you can go on my LinkedIn page. We had a meeting in Saudi Arabia in a health conference, and people from the IT were coming, so this thing is not going to work. I'm going to have to put firewalls on everything. So what firewalls? You have to have a zero trust architecture. Everything has to be authenticated. Every transaction has to be authenticated. Every transaction has to be encrypted so that your data remains safe. And then people ask, oh, well, can a phone really do that? The good news is 0.1 to 1% addition to what the CPU usage to actually process and consume the data as opposed to send it with RF and other technologies outside. So yes, this all can be done. It's not a science fiction. Now let's talk about some use cases. For instance, the home loan journey with cloud AI. If you do this with an LLM, just assume customer mentions, oh, I have plans to buy a home. And then 3 months later, you come back to the LLM. It seems like you've lost your mustache in the process. And then the LLM tells you, what home buying thing? Don't recall that conversation. Then you load up 5 years of transaction history. It probably costs you, 30, 40 rupees. Costs the bank, costs the institution 30, 40 rupees to upload and process that. So you get an experience of high cost, poor experience, right? And there's really no relationship. This is a transactional relationship. If you do this with a device first, you talk to your agent. After 3 months, the agent is remembering it and say, hey, for you to apply for this loan, you now have saved 3.2 lakhs for your 10 lakhs goal. And then after 6 months, it tells you, oh, now you can meet the requirements. I've checked all your finances. I can prepare. Should I share this data with the bank? And then you get your approval. And on the institution side, everything from underwriting to pre-approvals, qualifications, and all of that can be done with an agent that talks to your agent. They can discover each other, they can talk to each other, and close the transaction very quickly. So the business case for this is very obvious. Let's talk numbers. And I did some of these numbers. You can also go talk to Cloud, Gemini, and all of that. Go through the same exercise and see what it would cost to have a 24/7 agent on your phone. If you want to do this with the LLMs, hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on how engaged your customer is with the platform. On device, zero infrastructure cost. Zero. You're using the compute resources of the smartphone and nothing else. No additional infrastructure required. Then you have revenue multiplication. Why? Because you know real time the exact needs of your customer and you can respond very quickly. It doesn't take a month to get an approval for a loan. Things can be done in a day or two very quickly. The enterprise agents help close the deal faster. The customer agents identify and say, oh, you need this new product. And L&T Finance, whatever bank, has this solution for you. I can prepare all the documentation. You don't have to go and look for, I don't know, statements, this and that. I have all of that information. I combine it. I understand what the rules are to apply, and I'll submit it. All you have to say, submit, and I submit. And this is all based on trust, because you know the information that you're providing to your agent is safe and secure. Only the absolute essential information is shared, right? And you also know and see that your financial institution can quickly respond to your needs. So the business case is absolutely clear. And so how do you do this? This is a two-agent network. The way I would go about this is first to start with a simple thing like a savings goal for a loan pre-qualification. Build this trust through this permission-based data sharing by asking the customer, here's your agent. We're not in your data plane. This agent is working for you. You can share whatever you want securely with them. We don't see that. And then on your side, you build your own agents to automate underwriting and risk assessment. And this way, I'm not saying remove your bankers. The human in the loop is absolutely essential. Chatbot experience proved this. And one of the frustrations I had when I was at Wells Fargo is that when we were working on AI, I was EVP of R&D, and I was being told, build a chatbot. I said, well, chatbot creates nothing but friction. My personal experience with chatbot has always been screaming at the chatbot, saying, connect me to a human. The human touch is absolutely essential. But what we need is to remove all the obstacles for the bankers to be able to approve things and accelerate things, and also be able to provide the information that you need faster. This way you turn the banker into a superhuman, because they never make mistakes, because the agent is there to look at them, seldom makes mistake, maybe never is not the right word. They understand your data better. And so you build the consumer agent, you build the enterprise agent, and then you connect these networks. So there is a way for the consumer to share that data and close the transaction. The most important thing about this, that this is a partnership future. It's not about replacing humans. We've gone through that path before, and we shouldn't make that mistake again. It's about providing the insights that are needed in order to be able to provide the right level of service. Agents succeed because they enhance human relationships. They don't replace human relationships. If you aim to do that, you're sure to fail. This is a path to sustainable growth and a new era of trust, and trust is a key to success in a relationship with your customers. And this is not something that is going to happen in the future. It's happening now. The issue is whether you will lead or you would follow. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alamuti, for that wonderful session and great insights. I request you to please wait back.
Sure.
May I now request, ladies and gentlemen, the Chief AI and Data Officer, L&T Finance, put your hands together for Dr. Debarag Banerjee to come on the stage and present.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Questions?
Do we have any questions? We have a question here. Give you a mic passed on.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, no, it's okay. The what?
All right.
Oh, okay. Picture.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
The mic being passed to the gentleman there. We can take one question.
This is Rachana. Could you please shed a light on SLM, small language model orchestration, and how it will be better than LLM and in context of agentic AI?
All
and
right.
where we are going?
All right, wonderful, wonderful. So single language models, if they are monolithic and they're running on your device, they would drain battery. It depends on the architecture you use. If you build it microservice-based, it's modular, fantastic. And that's actually what really an agent is. Now, when it comes to orchestration, it's very interesting. Because just imagine, try to orchestrate a Bollywood dance. Not possible, right? Life is not like a symphony orchestra. It's very unpredictable. Things change really fast. So you have to get orchestration out of your mind and think about choreography to be able to deal with situations that are real-time changing and are completely fluid. Not that you don't need orchestration anymore. There's certain things, you know, for shopping, putting something in a cart, you know the process. You can orchestrate these things, right? But you can't orchestrate the financial needs of someone. Someone may be in need of credit tomorrow. They have an emergency. You need to be able to, your agents need to be able to choreograph as opposed to orchestrate. This is even more pronounced, obviously, for things like drones and robots. How can you, for instance, in a manufacturing floor, orchestrate the robot? You have to have a million edge cases, rule-based, to say if you're walking and you see oil, do this. If you see water, do that. And it's not possible to orchestrate these things. You have to have that intelligence to be able to choreograph.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Alamoti.
Okay.
Let's have a round of applause for Mr. Alamoti for that wonderful session and that question answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, our next session focuses on enterprise AI agents. Not theory, but what actually works in production. Our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Sanjay Krishnan, Vice President, Concentric AI, has been directly involved in deploying AI agent systems inside large organizations, dealing with scale, reliability, governance, and real business outcomes. He's a Silicon Valley-based executive with wide-ranging deep tech and AI expertise from augmented and virtual reality, autonomous driving, large language models, computer vision, and cybersecurity. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on the stage, Mr. Sanjay Krishnan.
Thank you. Okay. And can I move back? Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming. Thank you for the L&T folks for organizing this. Today, we're going to dig into enterprise agents, enterprise AI agents, what works in real life and what doesn't. And I'm going to keep this talk in two parts. First, we're going to go into what an enterprise agent is and how it's architected, right? And so just to get an overview and see all the various types of enterprise agents that are out there. But we're also going to do a very interesting case study in lending, and I think that'll be super relevant for all of you, and I think you'll really enjoy this. So I've put this together, and I have tried to be broad, as well as in a few places pretty deep, and go into what actually works, what doesn't work. So I'm hoping that all of you will be able to get something out of it. Let's jump right in. A little bit about me. I know the introduction already told you a lot about who I am and what I do, but you know, I've been a tech and product guy since the early days of AI when I used to work at Google more than 10 years ago now. And I've launched since then and scaled at a couple of different startups, AI products. I've mentored startups at myself at Silicon Valley in Berkeley and Stanford. And a few other places. I've taught a course on enterprise AI agents at Stanford University, and I myself an IIT Madras alumnus from many years ago. So that's a little bit about me. Okay. Just to set the stage here, just to make sure that we all understand what is an agent, right? Make sure that we understand the difference between an assistant and an agent. By now, if you've used any AI, you probably know this already, but just bear with me here. An agent answers questions, but an assistant answers questions, but an agent can actually complete a task for you, right? It's trained on, an assistant is usually trained on data, not so much on the workflows. And that's really the key here. And we'll look into some enterprise workflows and what works and what doesn't and how difficult it can be to replace an enterprise workflow, which is what really an agent is trying to do. And by the way, one common thing between the two, whether you're talking about assistants or agents, they can all make mistakes, okay? And so that's where you see the fine print. No matter what type of agent you're using, this can make mistakes, okay? And there's no such thing as reliable because humans make mistakes too. Okay. Enterprises have so many different functions, right? And there are AI agents, and there are startups developing AI agents for each of these functions. How do we look at what actually works, or which ones are more mature versus which ones are still in early stages? This graph out here actually tells you, ranks by size of average startup in that space, tells you which ones are actually a little bit further along in terms of the functions that the enterprise agents are working on. Legal, you can see legal, sales and marketing, recruiting are up there near the top, okay? And the reason for this is pretty obvious. These are workflows that are highly language-based, right? Looking at documents, summarizing documents, providing insights from it in one way or the other is a lot of that workflows. Now, if you're working in finance and you see yourself down in almost at the bottom of this list, there's a reason for that. And there's a reason for that is because there's a lot of workflows that involve various types of judgment based on numbers. These are not simple. Sometimes you have to figure out what types of analysis to do in order to get the right numbers and then make the insights. But don't worry, agents are coming. Okay, that's my message to you. There are lots of good agents that you already saw today earlier what L&T Finance is doing, but there's lots of other ideas, including in lending use cases, that I think we will, and I will show you some of that today later in my deep dive, that agents will be able to help you, as in you, a finance professional working in for the finance industry, to actually help your workflow as well. All right, but first, okay, what do these agents actually do to deliver business value? I want to say if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, it's that business value requires full task delegation, okay? And full task delegation, by the way, requires full context. Seems fairly simple, but this is worth remembering because a lot of times we forget that when we are using AI agents that maybe this will do, 80% of my job. Well, that's actually not enough because the business value really depends on being able to tell an agent, this is the outcome I want, and the agent should then be able to take it from there and go make it happen, right? And that's what really I mean by full task delegation. It doesn't do half a task, just like if you were to delegate to a human, half a task is not really that valuable, right? And by the way, if you want a full task delegation, you also want to make sure that the agent has the full context of what it's doing, why it's doing, what's the data it needs to do, and what it needs to remember from previous transactions. And so that's what I really mean by full context. And by the way, this is, what I just showed you is a rephrase of what actually came in the Anthropic Economic Index report just a couple of months ago, where they actually came to the same conclusions, right? That the majority of business use cases involve automation usage patterns that need full task delegation, and that the biggest bottleneck that we're going to face very soon is the bottleneck of trying to give that full context to an AI to actually accomplish that tasks that you can delegate to the AI effectively. Okay, so what does all this mean in terms of the architecture of agents? I've put it together in one sort of big picture, but in the center of this picture is what I call the context engineering, right? There's an underlying language model, but there's a lot of planning and execution that your agent has to do, and that's what we are in this, what we call the agentic flow or workflow in the center. But there's two important things on the side. I want you to keep that in mind also. One is the human oversight, which we all know. This is usually implemented in the form of either reinforcement learning or some sort of evaluation with human feedback. And on the other side is data governance. This is an important piece which is often overlooked, and I have to mention it here because any enterprise agent needs to work on data, and it's usually there are regulations or compliance requirements or some other constraints on what data is actually needed by what agent at what time, and these have to be respected by your agentic AI framework. So this is the emerging model, which is in the center. We have what we call the agentic workflow, but on either side, you have these guardrails with the human evaluations on one side and the data guardrails on the other, right? So we'll go through some of these examples in a little bit deeper in the case study that I'm just going to give you in business lending. A lot of these insights are coming from my friends at Agami AI, and I'll tell you more about them later. All right, jumping right in. Let's look at a business lending use case, okay? I divided this into 4 sections of what a loan officer or a loan team is going to go through. And imagine you are in the enterprise. For some of you who are working in this, this may be very familiar to already. But imagine you're a business loan, you're making small and medium enterprise or even big enterprise business loans. You're a loan officer, or you're one of the other folks in the bottom here of this flowchart of what your job description is. Okay, you may be a credit analyst, loan officer, credit team, underwriting team, or the committee that is actually in charge of making the final decision and recommendation. There's lots of stuff this entire team has to go through, right? Starting from understanding documents which are submitted, and usually these are bank statements, financial statements, digest it, find out what the actual ratios of interest are in terms of, let's say, the debt service ratio or your actual assets and liabilities ratio or various other financial ratios that matter to you in this context. The financial analysis, which compares year-over-year growth in these things, in these ratios of interest, and finally feed all that into certain rubrics or guidelines that your enterprise has in terms of making these decisions, and then you or your team has to come up with the final decision and final recommendation, right? There's a lot of complex things going on in here. Each of these bullet points in the slide is actually an agent that is replacing or doing the particular task that the human would do. Okay, so this, if you think of this entire thing as a lending agent, it's actually not one big agent. It's composed of 10 small agents doing each of these small tasks, augmenting the human who would do each of these tasks individually, right? From data, from the document understanding all the way to the final recommendation. And this is coordinated in a system of agents manner from one agent to the next, step by step. And we'll go through some of those examples as we go through this, okay? And I'm going to dig deep into the final agent here, which is the recommendation agent, because I think that is a little more interesting to give as an example. Plus, also in the time we have, I cannot go through every single agent in much detail. Looking at the first 3 steps, okay, I want to point out some of the bank statements and just document understanding and financial analysis is a huge task if you don't have normalized data. Now, normally we've relied on, OCR and things like that in the past, but what's happening in today's like vision language models and understanding of data, you can feed it, your bank statement in the form of a PDF. Here's an example from, a bank statement that you get from a bank, right? Canara Bank in this case. But what you really want is you are interested in certain normalized representation of it. You want the account number, name, balance. You also want the transactions in a particular way and order, and so that you can then ingest it quickly into your algorithms, right? And so to be able to do that, step 1 is just what I call document understanding. And imagine if you have dozens of different banks, each one with their own format. Normalizing this is a huge first step. And this agent that I just showed you in the previous slide, the first agent, which is the document understanding agent, right, is able to take this input on the left-hand side and produce that on the right-hand side. Now, PDFs look simple, but if you go to a financial data, for example, there are chartered accountants who will, literally type up. I used to have a chartered accountant. In 2020, he used a typewriter. Okay, so this kind of data, which is then scanned, photographed, and sent to you as part of a loan application, guess what? This AI, right, has been trained, and there's a lot of synthetic data that goes into this training, and I can tell you more about that if you want. Find me after the talk. I'll explain that in more detail. But this is able to take that, what you see on the left-hand side, and produce a highly standardized form which includes the items of interest that you really want, like gross receipts, annual operating margin, operating income, interest received, and so on. I'm only showing you a small snapshot on the right-hand side of the full data that's actually useful and needed for doing the analysis. But you can see from here how useful it is to be able to throw in any sort of non-standard document in any non-standard format. Forget the bank statement, which was a PDF. This is even more difficult, right? But this is what state-of-the-art is in terms of AI. and these vision language models, they're able to understand these in very quick way and with very high accuracy. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the accuracy that we're able to achieve to actually get to what we're seeing on the right-hand side. Okay, now I'm going to jump forward to this recommender agent, right? I just mentioned to you in passing in the first slide these 4 steps. Step 4 is this recommending agent, which takes all this data that you have, the first set of agents has produced, and now it's going to come up with a recommendation output. It's going to come up with two sets of outputs. The first is a decision summary, which is approve or reject, or a conditional approval. There are 3 types of outputs possible. And it's also going to come out with what's called a credit memo, right? Which is a narrative of what you actually, why you made that decision, right? But to get to that, you need to go through several steps, which is what I referred to earlier as the context engineering here, okay? So the context engineering includes, so if you look at on the left-hand side, you have configuration, RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation of the information database, contextual memory, and databases, right? All of these are used in respectively giving you examples, the policy documents, financial insights, and actually the borrower application details, right? And so each of these sort of inputs that are coming in are all context to the agent, and each of these contexts is fed in a different way to the agent that has to make the final recommendation decision. And there are different techniques, and each of those techniques is now well established in the field of context engineering on how you provide the right context to the right agent at the right time so that it can then make the right decisions for you. Okay, underlying all this is, of course, language models. I didn't really talk about the language model itself here. It turns out that the choice of language model itself is not that important. More important is how you construct the entire workflow, the agentic architecture. And this works reasonably well with no matter what type of language model you use. In this case, we've used Llama or GPT open source and actually works out pretty well. Let me walk you through a little bit more detail in a few minutes on what exactly the prompts look like, okay? If you read this carefully, this is what we've been doing with prompt engineering, right? You are a recommender agent for a business, whatever, credit private limited. Your role is to prepare a credit memo decision based on the borrower's application, financial metrics, etc. Be factual, be policy aware, use Indian credit terminology, CIBIL score, DSCR, etc., right? So it gives you all the context and also says you must produce one output, which is a decision block. So this is the level of detail into which the context has been given in terms of the prompts for these things. This is, by the way, I'm only showing you the example of this recommender agent. There are other agents, and each one of them has their prompts and has their context provided to it in appropriate ways. There is a task block. There is an output format block where it actually says, we want the decision to be one of these 3 things, and we want summary points, we want risk factors and conditions, and finally you'll notice something called confidence, and I'll tell you what that is. I don't know if you can read this, but I'm continuing what the context has been given to this recommender agent. How to arrive at the decision, right? Compare the key ratios. If the DSCR is less than 90% of the policy minimum or leverage more than 120% of the limit, then you reject, okay? Then there is also, when do you approve? And then in the middle, if it comes to a conditional approval, then we continue saying, what are the conditions that you would want to see in order to make this a conditional approval. And finally, this confidence score, right, is something that is to give you an idea of how confident the agent is in coming with a conclusion. We've given the guidelines to calculate a confidence score also, right? So for example, if some key ratios are missing, or if there are conflicting insights or the multiple data or inconsistencies, that reduces your confidence. It doesn't mean the decision changes, it just means the confidence in the decision drops. Okay, this then can be looked at by the final human person who is actually reviewing the agent's recommendation to decide whether the agent made the right call, or if this is too low a confidence, then should we go back to the borrower, ask for better data, different data, and things like that, okay? I'm going to show you an example of what the recommender output looks like. Okay, this is an example from an application. This example is showing a conditional approval. So the person has been approved with a condition. Look at the summary text. It actually tells you, gives you the insights from this application. Like the revenue is up 12% year over year. DSCR is slightly below the policy norm. Current ratio exceeds blah, blah. And by the way, it also tells you promoters have strong rural distribution network and maintain clean repayment history. So it's actually got all of that information from the analysis of the documents that it's done before, right? It's listing out the risk factors, and then it's giving you the conditions, and it's giving you a 90% confidence score. So fairly high confidence that the conclusion that it's come to is good based on the data that it's been given, right? So this is an example of how we're able to go from the beginning to a final output, right? And if you are a loan officer, you feed in all the documents and you get this at the output, that really is a game changer in terms of like the amount of work that's been saved and the time that's been saved to make this actually happen. Okay, quickly we'll look at evals. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but evaluation, known as evals, right, is basically how do you evaluate this whole agent, and how do you provide that human feedback so that this agent improves over time. This particular example was started out as something like 60% accuracy, but went over time to get more than 95% accuracy, right? And the way to do it is by giving it examples and then giving it feedback whether it made the right decision or not. And the way you do these evals is by actually using an evaluation, giving it evaluation data, an evaluation harness, and there are tools to do all of these, by the way, and giving it human feedback in terms of whether it got it right or wrong. I'm going to skip over this actual deep eval framework that was used to come out with this thing. Anyway, let me tell you the final result of what kind of performance was actually achieved. So this, using the Llama 3.1 8 billion model, which is an open source model from Meta, right, which actually allows it to run on an L4 NVIDIA GPU with 48 gigabytes of VRAM, produce this entire latency, okay, from the data ingestion all the way to recommendation output of 75 seconds. All right, so just over a minute to process this whole thing and give you an output. Accuracy was more than 99% for the common format documents, right, like tax returns and GST receipts, which are like highly structured, but more than 95% even for the very unstructured documents that we found, like, for example, financial statements, literally taking a photo and sending it, and it's able to get more than 95% accuracy in getting the insights out of those that actually matter, which is huge, I think. Now, it's not 100%, okay, there's always going to be some mistakes, and that's why you need humans to oversee this whole thing. But even at that point, I think it's a huge improvement over, or a huge help in augmenting what the human does and making, 95 times out of 100 makes the right decision, makes the correct decision, gets the data correctly. It's actually really, really useful, right? And extremely fast, of course. What would take, probably hours of human time has brought it down significantly. And the cost, if you run this using these GPUs that I mentioned at roughly 10,000 loan applications a month, it actually comes to roughly 33 cents per loan application to process through this entire pipeline. And that includes the GPU cost, but also the server and database cost. So all in, the cost is significantly low, the latency is significantly low, right? Very short. Accuracy is significantly high. So if you are a CFO in this audience, or somebody who's actually managing huge teams, you're going to save probably more than $100,000 a year in terms of like your team's efficiency going up. And if you're a CTO in the audience, or leading an engineering team, make sure you understand all of this. Pivot your engineering team to point them towards context engineering, towards building an agentic AI using commonly available frameworks that you can actually build something that actually solves real business use cases, solves it with high quality, repeatability, robustness, production scale, and very low cost. And the business teams are going to love it because this is what they've been waiting for. And I've given you an example here of the lending agent. But the same thing is across the enterprise, right? From legal, sales, marketing, HR, accounting, supply chain, finance. All of these enterprise functions have the same opportunity to get a huge step up in their improvement in productivity at very low cost using these agentic frameworks. All right, thank you. That's really all I had.
Well, thank you, Sanjay, for sharing those practical and real-world insights. Thank you so much. Now I request, ladies and gentlemen, the financial controller for L&T Finance to please come on the stage, Mr. Keshav Loyalka, to present the token of appreciation to Mr. Sanjay Krishnan. We can have a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is about how AI is changing the way we write code and build spreadsheets. Our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sriram Rajamani is a corporate vice president for Core AI at Microsoft. He has led the foundational research and product integration efforts that bring AI directly into everyday's developer and business workflow. He's currently working on reimagining the future of programming and software engineering in the era of large AI models. Please put your hands together for Dr. Sriram Rajamani. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. So thank you for inviting me here. I'm very glad to be here. My background is in programming and programming languages. I've spent my entire career building programming tools for very large teams. And the advent of AI has dramatically changed and increased very dramatically what programming tools can actually do. So we are living in an exciting era where programming and software engineering are just being disrupted and changed before our very eyes. So, but in this talk, the organizers also wanted me to talk about spreadsheets, which are also programs. So I will actually relate my experience building tools for programming, to also programming spreadsheets. That's what my talk will be about. But before I go there, I want to give you a little bit of sense for the capabilities of these large language models that enables these disruptions, both in programming and in spreadsheets. So let me just step back a little bit and say the technology arc that is enabling all these things. So a story of about 2 or 3 slides. In 2020, the first real large language model called GPT-3 was unveiled. And then in a couple of years, we had GPT 3.5 and GPT 3.4. And those disruptions relied on 3 insights. The first one was a particular neural net architecture called transformer architecture that was incredibly effective for very many different problems. The second was an idea called self-supervised learning, where, before this, people used to have to construct data sets for every problem. Right? What self-supervision allowed you to do was to take any text from the internet, and this you would recognize from Prime Minister Nehru's speech, hide one word there, tryst, and then say, ask the machine to actually guess that tryst is the answer. Right? And you could do that for every word in every document, and this you could do without any human effort. All you needed to do was to just look at all the documents in the world and play hide and seek with it. Right? So the machine could now guess any fill in the blanks. Any blank you miss, the machine can guess. The third idea was that you just do this with very large scale. Just puts lots of data, put many, many parameters in this LLM, and these LLMs have something called emergence. If you train LLMs like that, even though we train them to just do fill in the blanks, when with 8 billion parameters, they started answering questions. At 62 billion parameters, they started summarizing. And about 540 billion parameters, which is where I come in, they started generating code, right? Even though we just trained them to just fill in the blanks. So this was a real revolution that happened around 2020. And these LLMs now became completers, in the sense that you could say something, and it will complete what you're saying. That's what these LLMs could do. As a result, right, the first generation of coding tools were all completers. If you look at the first generation of GitHub Copilot, right, it will just watch what the programmer is typing, and it will complete it for you. right? So this was the first generation of programming tools. What happened since then, over the past 2 or 3 years, is that there is a new technological trend that is happening called post-training, which is after you train the LLM to do this next word completion, you train it to do question answering. You train the LLM to say, here is a bunch of questions for which I know what the correct answers are. I maybe have collected the data set for my domain or by employing people. Then what I have is actually, I have a question, and I get 2 different answers from the LLM. And then I have a human or some other model predict which one is preferred and which one is less preferred. The third one is that you have a goal, such as you want to play a game to win a game, or you want to take multiple steps, but you have an evaluator that decides which answer is correct, right? Using these things, you can now turn your just next token predictor into something that does tasks for you, right? There is also a recent development called inference time reasoning, where this kind of asking the LLM to do a task, the LLM spends more computation during inference time, right? And these are benchmarks where using inference time reasoning, you get higher answers like in the 70s and so on. But before inference time reasoning, these benchmarks, we could solve them only like 30 points, right? So these advances has resulted in new kind of capability called agentic capability, right? Unlike the previous generation of LLMs, where they could only complete sentences for you or fill in the blanks for you, with these LLMs, you can ask them to do a task, and they can invoke tools and do the task for you. As a result, the new coding agents are very different. Instead of, you can just say, create this service, do all these things for me, and these agents can create multiple programs, multiple files. They can create tests for you. They can run them for you. They can check whether your program compiles. If it doesn't compile, it can look at the compiler error messages and go and fix the programs. Many, many steps that humans can do, these things can just do automatically. This is actually absolutely dramatic that is actually happening right now. And this has many consequences for many industries, in particular programming, right? So if you want to do these days, right, if you want to develop new code, you don't just write the program. You go talk to these agentic LLMs and say what you want to build. And these can build new code, they can build documentation, they can build tests, and they really dramatically increase the speed of exploration and prototyping. But the responsibility of understanding, validating, and maintaining this generated code still rests with the human. The human agency is very important because just because the LLM generated that code, it doesn't take responsibility for that code. If there's a bug in the code, you as a human being who is using this is still responsible. So that's actually the contract that you have when you're using an agent. What I work on in Microsoft is not just this. I work on how to make these LLMs manage very large code bases that we have inside Microsoft, right? Like Windows and Office and Teams and like PowerPoint. I mean, those are like 30 million lines of code, 50 million lines of code, right? What you can do is actually, in addition to creating new code, you can also use LLMs to help you manage existing code, very large code bases, by just talking to the agent in natural language. You could say, oh, I have this problem in my code base. Can you explain to me how this code even implements this feature? And then help you fix it, which is very important because in many teams, right, there's a lot of churn, and the people who wrote the original code may have actually even left the company. New people may have joined. So LLMs greatly help you with these scenarios as well. But the most important thing is actually, even here, the LLM only proposes. Understanding and managing the edits that are done that are proposed by LLM is still very much the job of the engineer. That's actually a contract that one should remember very clearly. So I wanted to show you a real example we worked with an NGO called Bandhu, who wanted to build an application to help immigrant workers find rental housing, right? This was an NGO. They didn't have any programmers in their roles. They only had lawyers and civic activists, and they wanted to build this application. So let me show you actually how we helped them build it. So this is actually, this is an NGO. They wanted to help millions of immigrants find stable rental housing. So they wanted to build an application. Let me show you the app they built, and then I'll show you how they built it. So this is the app they built. This app runs in WhatsApp. You can sort of see how it works.
हमें बताइए किस तरह का ठहराव, कमरा सोने की जगह, पूरी संपत्ति, शहर का मासिक किराया, बजट।
मैं बंबई में कमरा ढूंढ रहा हूँ, 20,000 रुपए तक का चाहिए।
So now you can see it shows some houses. Then you can actually make a payment using UPI. You can actually sign a document for a lease and so on. So that's how this app was built, right? I mean, this is not surprising. Anybody can build an app like this, right? But what's interesting about this app was that this app was not built by programmers, right? We built a system which sort of looks like this, where the right-hand side is a natural language conversation for people in this NGO to build this app, right? So they built it by saying, oh, first, ask the user what they want, and once they found a house, charge the user 600 rupees to generate an agreement to it. But they just typed it in natural language. And this system had access to all the UPI APIs and so on, and it wrote the code, right? And the entire development was done by non-programmers. And the interesting thing I wanted to show you was that while the programmer that is doing it is not an expert, the system knows how the code looks. As a result, right, it has a lot of understanding about, for example, when you have to make a call to an API to pay 600 rupees, you have to handle various cases. Like, for example, what happens when the API credentials are wrong? What happens when the payment fails? You have to deal with all of those kinds of things, right? So the system prompts the user saying, you have to, when it fails, when there are all these error codes, what should you do? Right? The AI just engages with the user, with the programmer in this case, and helps them walk through different cases, which they found almost magical, right? I wanted to show this because, in some sense, right, when you are actually having non-programmers program, the AI also becomes a conversational agent to help you handle all the cases that you might not necessarily think about as a non-programmer, right? So it's very fascinating for me to work on this. So what I want to say is the following, right? What this taught me is that building a coding agent for programming is not just a technology problem. It's actually a human AI problem, and it's also a scale problem, because particularly if you're dealing with very large code bases, you can have code bases of the size of 30 million lines of code, 100 million lines of code. All of them cannot fit into the context window of the LLM. You have to build structures like graphs and other kinds of things that help you understand the large code bases. And the previous speaker was talking about context engineering and making sure that every task you give the LLM, you traverse this graph and find the right context that you give to the LLM. You also, as a programmer, you have many tools like compilers, build systems, and so on. It's important to expose those as tools so that the LLM can actually use them. And the final thing is actually, finally, that whether the product that you build is good, whether the correctness of it, the quality of it is something that is acceptable, that actually finally has to be owned by a human, right? The LLM is only an assistant that helps you do that, but validation, you can actually build things like verification, static analysis tools to improve the quality, but the final judgment of what is acceptable should lay with a human being. Right, so this is all I'm going to say about code. Now I'm going to transition to spreadsheets. And spreadsheets, in my eyes, they are programs. So I want to just, they use formulas, lots of them, and really large spreadsheets are as complicated as very large pieces of code, right? So I want to show you, given that spreadsheets are programs, how are LLMs helping us in programming spreadsheets? Right? The first thing I want to show you is how many of you use Excel formulas? Right? Probably all of you, right? And many of you would find that actually remembering the formulas, remembering which macros to use, is probably a pretty complicated thing to do. And this is where actually coding agents can greatly help you. Let me show you one demo about using LLMs to generate formulas.
Calculated columns for last
Maybe increase the volume.
Initials, and first name. With our formula prediction auto-completion, as you type, the system intelligently predicts the formulas you need. It understands the structure of your data and seamlessly suggests the correct formulas for each column. No need to memorize syntax or spend time troubleshooting. Just type and let the system do the rest. Next, let's explore a lookup scenario. Here, the user wants to find the capital city for a given country, in this case, Israel. As the user types, the auto-completion predicts a VLOOKUP formula, but when they decide to use XLOOKUP instead, the system adapts effortlessly. Now, we take it a step further with a cross-sheet lookup. The user references data from a different sheet, and the auto-completion prediction handles it with ease. Here, we encounter a range of data organized in rows, what we call row major tabular data. Our formula prediction supports all types of tabular ranges, intelligently selecting the right row and the correct data range. Not all data is neatly structured. In this example, we have values representing a loan calculation. As the user types monthly payment, the auto-completion predicts the PMT formula accurately, understanding the context and providing the right solution, even in unstructured scenarios. Finally, we move to a financial statement sheet. Some ranges are missing subtotals, but the auto-completion detects exactly which ranges need to be subtotaled. When a user wants to calculate the total for both equity and liabilities, the prediction knows to sum the previously calculated subtotals. This demonstrates the system's ability to understand hierarchical relationships and provide context-aware suggestion.
Yeah, so in some sense, right, even here, the principles I mentioned to you about programs, all of them apply, right? For example, if you have a spreadsheet, a very large spreadsheet with many pages, right? And if you want the agent to help you synthesize a formula that might involve dependencies across many pages, right? You need to build an agent where you somehow use external knowledge about the spreadsheet to give the right context to the agent of which pages and which columns and which rows are even relevant, right? You can't, that's actually something you need to help the agent to do. The other thing is that you can't take what this agent is doing for granted. It might actually well make mistakes. It's your job as a user of this to check whether the numbers that you are getting make sense to you. Maybe hover around and see what formulas it is generating, ask it in explanation, and you can actually ask it questions. Why did you generate this formula? And the agent will tell you why it generated this formula, and you will have to just interact with it to make sure. Think about this as a junior colleague that you asked to create this spreadsheet for you, right? And you have to double check the answers that this system is giving, and think about it like a productivity aid, right? That's how you should think about this, right? The next demo I'm going to show you is, so far I showed you how you can use AI to generate formulas, right? But there are tasks that you can now do with AI that traditional formulas cannot do. For example, suppose you want to analyze sentiments. Suppose you have a spreadsheet which contains feedback from users. Which of those feedbacks are positive sentiment? Which of them are negative sentiment? There is no Excel formula that can calculate that for you, because that's actually a natural language problem. So what you can also do is that you can integrate the LLM into the formulas themselves, right? To get new capability. Now I'll show you this, yeah.
Here we have some coffee machine feedback, and we'd like to categorize it into one of these categories and return the sentiment and emoji representing that sentiment. We're going to make use of the new Copilot function. Equals Copilot. Classify this feedback, and then we provide it with context. So I'm going to pass in the feedback, and then I'm going to continue into one of these categories. I'm going to pass it the categories, and then I'm going to say, return these columns. And I'm going to pass in the columns. Copilot is going to consider this entire query and then return the results. The results should spool to the grid. And there you have it. Category, sentiment, and an emoji representing that sentiment. And now, because this is Excel and it's connected to the calculation engine, if there's a change to any of these values, this will recalc. So I'm going to add a new category. I'm going to add maintenance. You can see that's now gone away and calculated, and I have maintenance coming through as one of the categories.
That's quite interesting, right? So now what we now showed is a new capability that formulas cannot do, but it is integrated in such a way that if you add a new category, it's just like the formulas, right? When you add a new row or a new column, the formula is just like the spreadsheet updates itself. Now it's just going to update itself, just invoking the LLM to calculate the output of every entry. So that's what these things are able to do. I'm going to show you one more one, which actually I know a lot of my friends use, which is importing data into spreadsheets. right? Like often we have a PDF file or a CSV file or something like that, and then we need to import that data into a spreadsheet. And there have been actually lots of solutions to do that. I think AI helps you do that as well. And when you import as well, right? It's not an entirely AI process. It's actually a human and AI collaborating together to make the importing successful and making sure that the final spreadsheet is the correct schema according to what you want, right? So let's just see how that happens.
An analyst copies data from a PDF and pastes it in Excel. The analyst is prompted if they want to use AI to convert the pasted data into a table. The analyst says OK, and the AI agent shows the suggested table. The analyst accepts it. The table is surprisingly good. There is only one issue. On rows 23 to 27, the data in columns E and F should be moved to column G and H. The analyst does exactly that on row 23. They are immediately prompted for whether they want AI to make the other edits. On getting a yes, the agent shows the suggested edits, which the analyst accepts. Thus, with only one copy-paste and 2 edits, the analyst imported the huge table on the left PDF accurately into Excel.
So what happened here, again, right, is actually another really interesting example of human-AI collaboration, where, of course, the agent and the AI don't exactly know. There's a lot of ambiguity, right? If you just take a PDF like there, and how do you import it? I mean, there's many ways in which actually you could want to create the spreadsheet that you might want to do. So what the agent does is that it shows you a possible answer, and then it watches what the user does. So when the user moves that column from here to there, the agent now takes a cue that, oh, they have moved this one particular number. And what they mean probably is not just that. We have to maybe move the entire column, right? Those are cues that the agent understands, and it redoes the importing, right? I think I predict that this is how these agents will work. They won't be able to get it first time. Just like when we talk with someone and we work with a colleague, like I sort of think about interns. I mean, I had a lot of interns in MSR, and I engage with them, right? And they might not understand what exactly you want to do. Actually, you might not understand what exactly you want to do either, because you might not even describe the task clearly to your intern, right? And it's this conversation with an agent which makes the model interactive and ultimately powerful, right? So I want to show one more, which is that so far, the 3 things that I showed you, one is to create formulas. The second one is actually creating formulas that use LLMs themselves. And the third one is importing. They are all specific things about using AI in the surface of the spreadsheet, right? But in the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that the way the LLMs are now proceeding is that they are becoming very agentic, which means that you don't even have to go at this level of detail to say, do this for me or do that for me. I could just think about the entire spreadsheet as an object and talk outside the spreadsheet and just have a conversational agent which says, do this for me and do that for me. And the agent knows which sheets to go and what to do. So I want to show you that.
Introducing agent mode in Excel, unlocking the full power of Excel for everyone. In Excel, start with a prompt, and Copilot gets to work while you steer and guide. Copilot explains its approach, and using its Excel expertise, applies the right formulas and charts. In just a couple of minutes, you get a full summary of key insights and validation steps to give you confidence in its work. Only Copilot speaks Excel natively. And with agent mode, Copilot builds Excel objects like table structures, formula syntax, and pivot tables. This means you can directly manipulate the grid yourself or iterate with Copilot to make adjustments. Try agent mode in Excel today and start vibe working with Copilot.
So what is happening here is the following, right? You remember I showed a similar slide for programming. This holds for spreadsheets as well, right? The invariant is the following. The problem that you're wanting to solve, be it a large piece of code or large amount of financial information in a spreadsheet, is just too large and too complicated for an LLM or an agent to comprehend, right? So the job of agent design is to make sure that for whatever task you want to solve, which is you want to do this thing to your spreadsheet or you want to do this thing to your code, the design, what people like me do, is that they actually understand the natural language instructions and use context engineering to pull the right information. Whatever portion of the code or whatever portion of the spreadsheet is relevant, you sort of make the agent focus on that information. That is context engineering. Then what you also do is that there is lots of tools and documentation. I mean, Excel has a lot of formulas. It has inbuilt functionality, right? And if you're writing code, you have compilers, you have build systems, and so on. Those are tools that programmers use. So what you try and do is that you make those tools available to the agent. Because the agent, is like another junior programmer. That's how you should think about an agent. And you make these things available to the agent. And then finally, it's absolutely important that the contract of using this is validation is done by a combination of automated review and finally human review. Right? You can do certain things where you can set things up such that if your spreadsheet has to have certain properties, the certain checks, you can actually encode them as formulas and make sure that every update the agent does, it first checks whether those checks pass and only then show the spreadsheet to you. It's possible to do that. But ultimately, actually, the correctness of what these things do is actually is up to the human, and you should think about the agent as a productivity tool. That's the best way to think about them. And I am towards the end of my talk. I want to conclude with this slide, which is we are entering an extremely interesting new era of agentic programming where you don't program at a very low level. You don't write code line by line. You write code by just talking about your intent, about what you want to do. And the agent is always available, and it acts as an assistant for you to convert that intent, which is typically in natural language. You can also give examples. You can say, if I want this input, you should get that output. Those are also other ways of specifying intent. And in the spreadsheet, the context, the intent, right, could be spatial. It could be other portions and so on. And it could be temporal as well, because you might want to first calculate one value. And depending on that value, you might want to calculate another value, right? And what is most important in designing these things is the human-AI collaboration, which is the agent doesn't always know what to do. It can make mistakes. But the art in designing these systems is in doing them in such a way that the human can inspect what the agent is doing. And if the human doesn't agree with what the agent is doing, the human can give feedback, and the agent can correct itself. The other thing that we do as tool designers is that we collect telemetry. When all these things happen, we actually figure out when the user accepts what the agent produces and when the user changes and corrects what the agent produces. And those actually, we use them as feedback, and then we either fine-tune the LLM or change the agent so that as more and more people use these systems, right, we can learn from the data and make these agents better and better. So these are just going to keep getting better every year. That's what's going to happen. Right? So the number one advice I want to give you is that if you don't use these tools, you are really missing out on them. You should be using these tools, and you should expect that these are just going to get better and better every year. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rajamani, for sharing your perspective on how to work with AI rather than just using it. Thank you so much. To felicitate Dr. Rajamani, I take this opportunity and welcome on the stage the Chief Credit Officer for L&T Finance. Put your hands together and welcome Usha Datta. Come on, guys, some energy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we take a short 15 minutes break, and the most awaited event for RAISE 2025 is Pitch Point, starting at 12:45. See you back here. Thank you so much.